One of the things we want our microbiome to be is as diverse as possible.
When most people think about health, they think, eat your vegetables, get some exercise, sleep 8 hours. People really aren't thinking about the soil that their food came from.
People will say, well, wait a minute. Do I have to get organic, or can I just make sure that, can I just test and make sure it doesn't have any pesticide residue? No, it's not the same. That higher quality spice is not only going to be more potent in terms of its flavor profile, but it's going to be more potent in terms of its health benefits. If you skimp on the ingredients, maybe they have a bad experience or not a great experience and they don't buy it again.
Our best and most fruitful customer relationships are those who understand that point.
There used to be a culture that was, brought from other countries when people emigrated here of using food as medicine, Jewish grandmas and chicken soups.
Yeah, we had to make medicines to fix us from all the shit we're eating.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly. If you take enough of it, or if you take enough of it in a highly absorbable form, you can get an effect that is as good as Tylenol or ibuprofen.
Science, baby.
Science.
Science.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the OG Spice Guy Show, where we dig into the real stories behind the world's boldest flavors, from the fields where they're grown to the businesses that bring them to your table. I'm your host, Jonathan Raju. If you're a longtime listener, you know we love talking about spices as living chemistry, as culture, and even as medicine. Today, we're exploring how healthy soils, traditional botanical wisdom, and modern biochemistry intersect to shape human wellness, and what growers, brands, and R&D teams can learn from these connections. Joining us for this episode is a nutritional biochemist, author, researcher, and entrepreneur, Dr. Shawn Talbott. He was an Olympian and has served as a nutritional educator for professional athletes, and he's written several best-selling books. For his upcoming book, Wild Medicine, he traveled the world studying how traditional cultures use food and botanical medicine in ways that modern science is only now catching up to.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear what he did in the Olympics. We're going to ask. That's the first question.
Should we guess what type of Olympian he was?
Oh, that is a great one. Okay, so I kind of know what he looks like.
Yeah. So we're stereotyping.
I think it's, so now I'm going to say, something like running? No, or like archery?
Archery, is that your
Could
guess?
Could be kayaking. Is it winter or summer? We don't know.
No, you gotta guess.
All right, he's on. We gotta guess. Okay, I'm gonna go.
All right, you going winter or summer?
I'm going summer.
Okay.
And I am going heptathlete.
Okay.
Heptathlon.
All right, I don't know what that is.
I don't even know what it means. I think it's 5 events.
Oh, okay. All right, super specific.
Okay, what are you guessing?
I'm gonna go summer as well.
Okay.
And I think some sort of running.
Okay.
Yeah.
Long distance.
Long distance.
He's a skinny white guy.
Yeah.
Long distance. I don't know. And not like an archery, not one of those specific kind of.
No, I don't see it.
Join the Olympics, but it's really not a sport.
I don't see it.
Like shooting or something. No. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll ask him.
We'll see.
I just wanted to ask you about your trip to New York really quick.
It was awesome.
Yeah. So you went to New York to watch baseball.
Our stadium baseball tour. This is our 3rd year running.
Yep.
So we have just accomplished our 18th stadium.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We are, there's 30 MLB stadiums, and we do this with 2 other families.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's 6 of us total that go each year. So this year we did New York.
And just the 2 stadiums.
Just the 2 stadiums. Normally every year we do like 5 or 6, and it's like just boom, boom, boom. And so this year we decided to slow it down a little bit, do a little bit more tourist activities.
Yeah.
So we were in New York for a week. We planned this entire trip. I didn't even know that World Cup was going to be in New York, and of course we didn't know the Knicks were going to win the championship.
Nobody did. Yeah.
So we were
You were there at the same time
in the middle of all of that.
Yeah. That's awesome, though.
Yeah. So we did.
Never forget that.
Mets and Yankees.
Okay.
So
which was the best?
We really like Met Stadium.
Oh,
really, really cool. Yankees had this new stadium. It's just, it's not the same. It's not.
You said it's a little corporate.
Little corporate, yeah.
I haven't been to either. I will go on the next one. I'm going on a trip to San Francisco next month. I was just planning it yesterday, and we're going to go to Oracle for the first time. And
awesome.
It's hard. The Dodgers aren't there.
Yeah.
So I don't want to root for the Giants. I hate the Giants.
That's going to be our last trip of this season. We're going to go up to San Francisco when the Dodgers are playing the Giants. So that will knock off Giants Stadium.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, I'm anxious to hear what the Olympic event was. So can we bring Shawn on?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Dr. Shawn Talbott, welcome to the show. We're super excited to have you.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where are you calling in from?
Yeah.
Just south of Boston. Yeah, I'm a New England guy. So have you been to Fenway?
We did Fenway last year when the Dodgers played the Red Sox.
Okay, that's a great stadium.
Oh, fantastic. And we even went early and we did a tour, and so we could understand all the history that Fenway brings.
Yeah, I've been to Fenway as well. I actually saw Wade Boggs play for the Yankees at Fenway.
Oh.
And true to Boggs' reputation, he beat out a infield base hit by sliding headfirst into first base. It was
that
awesome,
sounds like Wade Boggs.
Right? It's so Wade Boggs. Okay, so before you came on, we were trying to figure out what you did in the Olympics. Because when you throw that down, it's very varied. So tell us what you did.
Yeah, so I was a rower. But there's an asterisk here, right? I never actually was in the Olympics for rowing because back in the olden days when I was a rower, I was on the national team, but lightweight rowers were not allowed in the Olympics back in those days. They are now, which is fantastic. So I was national team for rowing, but then I went to the Olympic Training Center as a cyclist. So, there's not much of a career after your collegiate rowing days. There's no like professional rowers, so you have to find something else to do with your time. So I became a cyclist.
Okay.
Well, what's it? So is there a correlation there? I mean, do you feel like lower body is everything in rowing, and so you're doing cycling, or is
lower body is 70% of it?
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, rowing's a good sport, but it's a lot of lower body. But then obviously you have to pull the oar with your arms, but all the drive, you're moving the boat with your
feet,
thighs, and your butt.
Yeah.
If I knew he was out of Boston, that might have given us a little more info on rowing, because it's such a
New England thing.
It is very much a New England thing, that's for sure. Yep.
Yeah.
So, all right, Shawn, tell us a little bit about yourself to kick us off, maybe, and your platform.
Yeah, so I'm a nutritional biochemist. That's what my PhD is in, nutritional biochemistry. So a lot of times when I'm educating about nutrition, I talk about neurotransmitters and stress hormones and like all the biochemistry of how food affects your mood. So food and nutrients and spices can change your biochemistry in your body, and that biochemistry changes how you feel and how you perform. So like after I did my sort of athletic career, I did a lot of counseling at the Olympic training centers, and I would talk about biochemistry a lot, trying to get these athletes and coaches to understand what's happening at the level of your biochemistry is really what's driving your mental and physical performance, right? So that's the kind of work that I do. And it's because I also do product development. I'm always looking at, where do these ingredients come from? How are they sourced? How are they grown? How are they being extracted? Like all that kind of stuff. And those are things we can get into as we get into our discussion. But it's not always just about like this nutrient does this thing in the body. There's a lot about like where the nutrient comes from, how it's put together, that determines a lot of how it functions in the body.
Shawn, I think it's super interesting because from our standpoint at High Quality Organics, when a customer will come to us, they want some sort of specific blend, a custom blend. They're always looking for label claims. That's what the food industry is. Nowadays everything's about a label claim. And so, I'd be interested as we have our discussion to kind of get into the biochemistry behind these ingredients and how they, eventually come for a label claim.
We can probably also talk about there's one aspect of like what can you say about this?
Yeah.
There's another aspect of like what the consumer experience is going to be.
Yeah.
And a lot of times like how something is grown and how it's processed and where it comes from. It might not necessarily change what you can say about it, like front of package kind of stuff, but it absolutely changes the customer experience, like how it tastes, how it works. It's going to make them feel better, and that, sometimes, often, will change the whole dynamic of that product. Like if the customer has a good experience, are they going to buy it again? Or if you skimp on the ingredients, maybe they have a bad experience or not a great experience and they don't buy it again. Right? That's a real economic, factor. Are you going to sell it again to somebody?
Yeah. When most people think about health, they think, eat your vegetables, get some exercise,
Right.
sleep 8 hours. People really aren't thinking about the soil that their food came from. Can you tell us a little bit about why maybe that should be?
Yeah, so a lot of my work considers the microbiome, right, which is the bacteria in your gut. And so, a lot of times I think of the microbiome, like this collection of trillions of bacteria, is almost like an internal version of soil that's out there in the world. Like that's where the life is. That's where we're producing a lot of the neurotransmitters and signaling molecules and things like that make our body and mind go. The soil is where it all starts, and the soil is where the microbiome lives out there in the world. So if you have good quality soil, good quality microbiome, you're going to have healthier plants. Those plants are going to produce a much more rich and diverse collection of phytonutrients, which sometimes are important for health properties, sometimes are important for taste. And if you don't have that good quality soil, you're still going to get the plant, you're still going to get the spice, but it's not going to be as rich in those bioactive compounds. So you're not going to have the same health benefits. You're not going to have the same experience like we just talked about a second ago.
Yeah.
So it really all starts from the level of the soil. And how the soil is taken care of, how it's regenerated, how are you using pesticides and chemicals or not? There's a lot that goes into it that I think most people don't even consider.
That's what's great about being on this show with Jonathan, learning about organic versus conventional. We've talked about soil in the past, and that those pesticides and all the conventionally allowed crap.
Yeah.
It
all in the
seeps
soil.
in the soil, and so even if you later down the road, you have to give it what is the amount of
3
years?
years.
3 years for the soil before you can go from a conventional farm area to a organic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I run into this a lot. Is people will say, well, wait a minute, do I have to get organic, or can I just make sure that can I just test and make sure it doesn't have any pesticide residue, right? Isn't that the same? And I go back and I say, no, it's not the same, because you're not considering that microbiome diversity of the soil. Like that in and of itself is going to change what that plant does, and that is going to change what your end product is. So it's not just about can I determine that there's a pesticide there or not. It really is that whole ecosystem, if you will.
Shawn, what's the strongest evidence you've seen that connects farming practices to meaningful differences in human health outcomes?
That's a tough question, actually, because there's not a lot of what you would call hard direct research.
Yeah.
Right. We can observe that if the soil is treated this way, the plants produce this and they taste better, or the plants produce this and they work better in terms of giving a physical outcome or a mental outcome. So like we can observe some of that, but there's not a lot of published clinical trials where we can point to it and say, see, there's a higher level of this polyphenol in the plants. Like that kind of stuff doesn't really exist. But I'm really encouraged because a paper came out a couple of months ago showing that if you can sort of bring the outside microbiome inside, people who live inside have better health outcomes. And the researchers looked at immune system parameters. So things like inflammatory markers were lower, healthy immune system vigilance, what we call immune system priming, was higher if you basically had some dirt in your house. And it was really funny how the researchers described this. They described it as soil to rug transfer, right? And I actually contacted one of them. I said, my mom, when I was a little kid, she would have called that tracking dirt into the house,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And that's basically what they did is they took the outside microbiome inside. They basically inoculated the inside of a living area with an outside soil microbiome, and the people living in that environment did better, based on these immune system parameters, right? So that same idea of maintaining the plants, exposure to the microbiome, I think that holds, but there isn't a lot of like direct research that shows that health outcome yet. But I think it's coming.
So is there anything a regular consumer can do when they're, walking down the grocery store aisle and picking food that were grown in I don't know, healthier ecosystems?
That's always a tough one, right? Because then you're trying to look at organic certifications and labels that say free of pesticides, or sustainably grown, or that kind of stuff, right? So
non-GMO.
Yeah, non-GMO. Yeah, consumers also have to start to be like grocery store detectives to try to find this kind of stuff, right? But just the fact that they're asking those questions is going to help get them a lot of the way down that road, right? Because the companies that are doing this kind of stuff and doing it the right way are going to want to go out of their way to say, here's why we do it, here's what's happening. A big piece that I tell consumers to look for is, what are the relationships between the companies that are selling the end products? Where are they getting their raw materials? Do they have direct relationships where they're helping with what's happening on the ground? Are they helping with, supporting the local economies where these raw materials come from? That's a really important consideration.
That's something that I always focus on with high quality organics is our best and most fruitful customer relationships are those who understand that point and that really want to partner with HQO, which allows us to partner with our suppliers for long-term success. And really, going to these countries of origin and saying, okay, we're going to help you. We're looking for so many metric tons of, ginger, turmeric, black pepper, what have you. Here's what 5 years is going to look like. Here's how we're going to help stimulate economy, provide whatever best practices you guys need, et cetera. It's all because of that volume, that partnership, right? And you see this full, downstream effect all the way to that packaged good that, we're supplying raw materials to our customers who are then manufacturing something that's going into a box or a package or something.
Consumers, like the end user of that product, and some of the customers that are making those products sometimes miss that and think that, success is just the cheapest per kilogram, right? Here's my price per kilo, and I'm going to go for the cheapest one. That isn't necessarily going to be the best thing because you don't get the right quality. You might not get the right supply chain. You might not be able to plan that 5 years in the future so that you have, consistency across your raw materials. So like having that relationship where you're working together with the actual growers and suppliers is it's huge.
It's massive.
I just want to jump here and say what I've heard from you over the last year and a half on this show is that spices matter, right? Like when these foodie chefs are making all the, they're farm to table and they're doing all this healthy food and you're like, well, are your spices organic?
And you're seeing this revolution in the food industry where, during the war, that baby boomer generation, there was a ton of food tech, food science that was coming out that was producing cheaper food, right? You got a box of macaroni for, pennies or nickels.
Right.
You have hamburger helper meat in a can. I mean, and it was great. It was Mother's Little Helper. It was quick, fast, cheap, convenient foods.
Jetson's food, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And so now you're seeing this metamorphosis now with, I think it really started with the millennials and moving on to Gen Zs, Gen Alphas, as they're becoming more educated. They're demanding, it's understood that food is organic. Like that's a minimum. And then they're wanting to see what are the other claims. Is it gluten-free? Is it, single origin sourced? Where is it coming from? Just the level of education is so much higher.
Education. Yeah. We're all just trying to figure out how to live longer, be healthier, and not just save a buck.
Right. And spices really are like have an outsized effect on health. And I think a lot of people don't really really understand how medicinal spices really are,
Yes.
right? And so if we're thinking of spices as medicines, you want the best cinnamon
Pure.
or the best turmeric or
That's
the
right.
best sage or whatever
That's
the case may be.
very, very profound. Very profound. Because again, as somebody who's dealing, a lot of people just look at spices as commodity. And they'll say, well, I need to buy 5,000 pounds of turmeric from you. And, I quote them a price. And I was like, well, this guy down the street's offering, 5 cents cheaper, and that guy's 12 cents cheaper. And so, you're really just they're looking at it as a commodity. I just need to put this in to complete the recipe so I can move on with my day. As opposed to, let's take a medication, and let's flip the script and say, okay, Rob, here's a blood pressure medication.
Yeah.
But I could go down here and I could get it from this cheap pharmacy. Do you want me to do that for you, bud? It'll save you $5 a pill.
That's the exact way to think about it.
So if you change that mindset,
that higher quality spice is not only going to be more potent in terms of its flavor profile,
right,
but it's going to be more potent in terms of its health benefits.
Right.
It's going to be, in the case of turmeric, a better quality turmeric is more anti-inflammatory
Yep.
than a lower quality turmeric.
Yep.
A higher quality sage is going to be better for the brain
Yep.
than a lower quality one, right? And that's something that I think is still not very well understood
Yeah.
out there in the general public.
And, especially spices is a category that is just, is so badly adulterated. There's
we've heard about this.
so many games and tricks are played in the spice world. So again, working with suppliers who care, that are working with single origins, that are, have boots on the ground, and they're saying, no, I can tell you, it's like when we were at ASTA and we interviewed Ram from ITC, they care.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's who we choose to partner with. And you're going to see that reflected in the price, but you're going to see it in the quality as well. So I want to shift gears here because your new book, Wild Medicine, is clearly informed by your experiences traveling.
Jonathan's traveling all over the world, talking to farmers and figuring out how to get them here. So where'd you go?
I've written 14 books. Wild Medicine will be my 15th. And the publisher was kind of like, okay, so what's next? What's the next book? And I've already written 2 textbooks about dietary supplements. So herbal medicine, here's all the research on turmeric, here's all the research on cinnamon, here's all the research on, whatever the herbal supplement is. And I didn't want to write another encyclopedia kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So I said, what if I did a travel log where I talked about, here's what this herb is good for. There's a chapter on heart health, there's a chapter on brain health, there's a chapter on gut health, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, I will talk about my top 5 favorite plants or herbs or spices for that area of health. But I also want to talk about the people. I want to talk about where does this come from? How is it grown? What makes a good version of this versus a bad version of this? What are the people who live in that part of the world? Why do they grow this in the first place? How do they use it as medicine? How did I find out about it? What's my relationship with them? So it has a lot of pictures. It has a lot of stories, and it's more like a travel log than an encyclopedia, which was really fun to write. But I've been all kinds of cool places. I've been to jungles. So I've been to the Amazon. I've been to Madagascar, Malaysia. I've been to deserts. I've been to big farms. Some of these things are cultivated. Some of them are wildcrafted. So you have to actually traipse out into the middle of nowhere to find some of these things. Whereas other ones are just right there at the greenhouse. I've learned all kinds of really cool farming techniques. One that I tell people all the time is that in South Africa there's this really cool medicinal plant called kanna that is used for depression. It's used for stress levels. It does a lot of really cool things to help you sort of thrive in the face of stress. But when I pulled up in South Africa to the cultivation facility, right, all these beautiful greenhouses, I noticed that the entire property was surrounded by these tangerine groves. And I pulled up and I was like, I didn't know you guys were in the tangerine business. And they said, we're not. The reason we plant the tangerine trees is because it attracts this little bee that also pollinates our kanna plants. So if we have tangerines here, we get the bee. If we get the bee, we have better pollination. If we have better pollination, we have better kanna. So it was tangerines were only there to help them with their
Pollinate.
kind of crop.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, that kind of stuff blows me away because I have my expertise in biochemistry, but I don't know anything about the cultivation of this traditional medicinal plant, but they do.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like it's that kind of stuff that's so cool when you get to know the people.
Yeah. You see, and then I think taking it one step further, what HQO would then do is if we learned of something like that, we're trying to buy the canna from them, but they're also growing tangerines. So we say, well, we do citrus also. So let's talk about how do you harvest the citrus?
Two for one.
Yeah,
man.
2 for 1, and you could juice it locally and sell it in the local market because you don't want to sell the juice or ship the juice. And then what we want are the citrus peels, and because we use that in a lot of our products as well. And so,
Yep, that makes perfect sense.
I think that's where it's a beautiful, really symbiotic relationship.
And again, I want to say that in some of these rural places where you're going, they know how to use the spices as medicine a lot better than we're using chemicals now, right? Because we're so Western.
Yeah.
As opposed to Shawn's going out finding out these people that go, no, this is the medicine that we have.
Yeah. So, let's talk about that. Shawn, I'm curious as to, with your experience traveling, food and medicine aren't really viewed as separate categories. And they're already known that spices like turmeric have beneficial effects. So why, do you think that the U.S. is so behind on this?
I think we kind of lost the plot about 200 years ago when like modern pharmaceutical medicines came and, became sort of the new thing. And everybody kind of switched to that. Like there used to be a culture that was, brought from other countries when people emigrated here of using food as medicine. The Jewish grandmas and chicken soups and things like that, right? I sort of jokingly refer to like Italian grandma medicine, right? Using a baseline diet to prevent diseases in the first place. Yep. We're slowly shifting back to that because the science is sort of catching up and saying like, a good example is here's the Mediterranean diet. Yeah. The Mediterranean diet now has been studied in, thousands of research studies to show, hey, wait a minute, this can actually prevent dementia. Wait a minute, this can prevent cancer. Wait a minute, this can prevent hypertension and cardiovascular disease and my specialty area, mental health. It can help to treat and prevent depression, right? So that the list goes on and on and on. That the science is sort of like going back to that, saying, wait a minute, these diets that are high in fiber and high in phytonutrients and high in spices actually have these medicinal qualities to them, and we need to get back to that, right? Going away from, you guys were joking around before about like these, the Jetson, kind of chemical diets. We're slowly shifting back. The pendulum is swinging back towards these more whole food kinds of approaches, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had to make medicines to fix us from all the shit we're eating.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
All right, so let's get into spices themselves. This is the core of what the show is about, so I want to go through some of the big ones with you. And I think it could be really cool for, the buyers in the United States, maybe putting organic black pepper on one of their products, and they don't even know about its health benefits. So I'm just going to list out some spices and tell me what the science says or how they're traditionally seen.
Okay.
So we'll start with probably the most popular one is turmeric, right? Everybody knows turmeric is healthy. So, I'm sure you've written books on turmeric. Give us
lots of chapters on turmeric.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
So talk to us.
Turmeric has great evidence, both from a traditional use perspective, right? Populations that eat lots of turmeric in their diets, curries and things like that, have lower incidences of a lot of the inflammatory diseases, right? Okay. So less cancer, less heart disease, that kind of stuff. Less neurodegenerative problems, right? Because neuroinflammation is a big driver of a lot of brain damage and things like that. So if you consume a lot of turmeric, you're going to have less of those diseases. There's also really good research studies, like placebo-controlled randomized trials, where if you feed people more turmeric, their inflammation goes down, and you see benefits along those whole those biochemical pathways. And that's gotten us to a point where a lot of people will say like, oh, turmeric is a natural anti-inflammatory, which is true if you take enough of it or if you take enough of it in a highly absorbable form, you can get an effect that is as good as Tylenol or ibuprofen in terms of an anti-pain, anti-inflammatory kind of an effect. So that's great that we can say here's this natural anti-inflammatory that in certain ways is equivalent to these synthetic anti-inflammatory drugs that we use. And I think that's great. But I think that misses the point a little bit, which is, we can take turmeric as this natural medicine, but the real medicinal qualities of it is let's eat a little bit of it every single day in our food. That's the traditional usage of these spices as medicine, is that we're getting them on a consistent basis versus using them as a treatment. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Totally.
yeah. Just incorporating into part of your daily routine, I think, is important. I'll give you an example. So, last couple of years, I've been on a weight loss journey, and one of the things that I learned about was, intermittent fasting. So I was doing all of it. I still am, but yerba mate. So I love yerba mate, tea. And I've been drinking it for years, kind of on and off, but I read that, hey, it has a cholerogenic acid in it, which kind of amplifies your fat burning, especially when in a fasted state. And I was like, oh, well, that's easy. I can just sip on yerba mate all day long. I'm here in the office, I'm working, and I love it as a tea.
Yep.
And so, so now it's part of my daily routine, and I'm drinking, a decent amount of it every single day.
Turmeric there's different quality grade turmeric. So you guys aren't, the turmeric you guys are selling isn't like medicine grade.
It's not a nutraceutical grade. We're
grade
doing
where taking supplements or something.
Yeah,
like that.
we're
It's not
doing
that.
more of a culinary grade,
Right.
and it really has to do with the curcumin content.
Okay, cool.
Right.
turmeric.
Here's where you can go either way with that, right? So you can look at turmeric and you can say, oh, it's the curcuminoids, right? The bioactive compounds that have the anti-inflammatory effect. And so now the question is, okay, do we want to try to get as high curcuminoids as possible, or maybe even just pure curcumin? And we know that's going to have, this sort of narrow effect. Or do you want something that is more holistic, if you will, and you get a little bit of a multitude of curcuminoids, right? That's actually a legitimate question. Where do you want to take this pharmaceutical approach and get a really high level of an isolated bioactive, or do you want to get a less isolated but more diverse collection of what nature intended in the first place? That's a legitimate question.
So before I want to move on to some of these other spices, inflammation is a word that we hear often. I think just kind of given your background, I think you're, you're uniquely situated to be able to explain this to us. So can you help break, what is inflammation? Why is it so bad? We hear a lot of anti-inflammatory. I even heard you say neurodegenerative disease. How does inflammation, affect the body?
Yeah, so inflammation isn't really a bad thing, right? Inflammation is just how the body protects us.
Yep.
So, inflammation is actually sometimes a good thing. It's inflammation is a great example of a biochemical Goldilocks situation, right? Where, the whole, the Three Bears story, right? Goldilocks, this porridge was too hot, this porridge was too cold, this one was just right. Inflammation is a story of biochemistry being just right. If you've got too much inflammation, that's usually what people are talking about when they say inflammation. They're talking about too much inflammation. We also don't want too little inflammation. If we had too little inflammation, our immune system couldn't protect us from viruses and things like that. If we have too much inflammation, that can impede the body's ability to heal itself, and it can actually cause damage in and of itself. So, when people are talking about inflammation, it's this balance between these signaling molecules called cytokines. Some are inflammatory, some are anti-inflammatory. And what we want is this dynamic balance between anti-inflammatory effects and inflammatory effects. And that has to be sort of on a not even minute by minute, millisecond by millisecond basis. And it's mostly controlled by your gut and your immune system. And so if we can have that in balance, like, some of these herbs that we'll talk about, turmeric and ginger and, a number of them, their main benefits are not that they're anti-inflammatory necessarily, but that they help with that dynamic equilibrium of just right inflammation, so that we can be inflammatory when we want to be, and we can be anti-inflammatory when we need to be.
Balance.
Never heard that before, by the way. You heard it right here.
Yeah, you heard
and
it
that was
here
great,
first.
Sean, to say that it's not that it's anti-inflammatory.
Yeah.
It's that it's balanced and manages your
Yeah.
inflammatory or
Right.
anti-inflammatory. That's
Which goes
great.
back to the cytokine example of, do you just want a shit ton of curcuminoids?
Right.
Or do you want a variety, right? Because, it's not about bringing the inflammation to zero.
Yeah.
It's about keeping it in balance.
Right, exactly. Having that variety of them, where it's a variety of curcuminoids, or if we can think more broadly, a variety of spices in general, that really helps with that dynamic ability for the inflammatory cascade to adapt when it needs to. If you take too many anti-inflammatory kinds of either spices or medicines, that can actually be a bad thing, to suppress your immune system too much, or suppress your inflammation too much. That can be just as bad as being overinflamed.
Yeah, that reminds me of this episode I used to love watching, The Big Bang Theory, and they were going to do a blueberry pie eating contest. Sheldon's very, very much a brilliant scientist, but a complete dork.
Yeah.
And they were about to begin, and he was like, wait a minute. Blueberries are high in antioxidants. If I eat too many blueberries, what happens if I run out of oxidants?
Blueberries are rich in antioxidants. So with all those antioxidants, what if I run out of oxidants?
I always remember that scene. All right.
More spices.
Yes, more
right?
spices. Give me, 90 seconds on ginger.
Ginger is also anti-inflammatory, but one of the great benefits of ginger is that it's also generally good for your gut. It's one of the things that I recommend to people all the time as it's like, I put it in a category called motility enhancers.
Oh, yes.
So it doesn't necessarily make you go to the bathroom, right? So it's not a laxative kind of an effect. Yeah. Motility enhancer is something that helps the food move through your digestive tract at the appropriate speed. So ginger, people listening probably understand it as like it can be used as an anti-nausea kind of a thing. If you have, if you're feeling seasick or something like that, you can, or you have a rumbly tummy, you can take ginger. But it helps change the overall dynamics of how your gut moves food through the digestive system.
That's why I understood that they serve ginger ale, like on planes. That's where it got popular. People get upset stomach while you're flying.
Yeah,
ginger ale
works for me.
Yeah, it's good for people who have trouble with heartburn. It's good for people who have trouble with just like general digestive disturbances, like bloating and nausea and stuff like that. And the reason is it has calmative properties. It also has these motility properties. It helps the food move. So yeah, it's a lovely one for sort of general gut function.
All right, this is one of my favorite ones, black pepper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, black pepper is a wonderful bioavailability enhancer.
Yes.
Is the easiest way to say it. So if you want to take something like turmeric, which is a great example, right? We talked about the anti-inflammatory benefits of turmeric. The problem with turmeric is that a lot of those bioactives are very poorly absorbed. And so if you want to have that very strong anti-inflammatory effect, you have to take a ton of it. Or you can combine it with black pepper, and now that black pepper enhances the bioavailability, so you get more of an anti-inflammatory effect with a smaller dose of turmeric. Yep. And the compounds in black pepper just help your intestines absorb more of everything that's there.
So when we're formulating, if we have a blend that has ginger and turmeric, we'll almost always put in black pepper to help with that bioavailability.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Science, baby.
Science.
I mean,
it's like magic, but real.
But real.
All right, cinnamon.
Well, cinnamon is one of my favorite. I'm actually having some cinnamon right now.
Oh, okay.
I put cinnamon in my coffee. Because it's so good for managing blood sugar levels. And this is another example of, there are some direct anti-diabetic effects of cinnamon, but you have like it helps with insulin function. It helps lower glucose. It has these anti-diabetic effects, but you have to take a lot of it at once in order to get that acute effect. Or you can just sort of sprinkle it around in the things that you're normally consuming, and you get this very gentle modulation of your blood sugar benefits. So like, I'm not diabetic or anything like that. Why would I have cinnamon in my coffee? Because I want to make sure that my blood sugar level is modulated appropriately throughout the day, because that's good for when later on I go exercise. Yeah. It's good for when I'm sitting here, trying to write something. I want my brain to be functioning the right way, and your brain runs on glucose, so you want to make sure you have nice modulated glucose levels. Cinnamon can really help that overall process.
I'd imagine, I think back to my weight loss, is that also helps with weight loss, keeping your glucose levels low.
100%.
When your glucose is low, the fat will go. So,
but when we did the cinnamon episode, Shawn, we afterwards loaded up on like Cinnabons. And
yeah, so should you eat a bunch of cinnamon? I don't think he's saying eating Cinnabons, Rob.
No, it doesn't count.
That doesn't count, my friend.
Or what was the liquor? What's a Fireball?
Fireball, yeah. You can't be drinking whiskey.
It's healthy.
That's what
we've
known
we should
as
hang
a
out
health,
more.
Yeah, right?
That's a health halo. That's what they call that in the
Is that
industry.
right?
A health halo.
I got them.
Yeah.
I got them.
All right, we got two more. These are two herbs I don't think often spoken about enough. First one is sage. Talk to us about sage.
So sage is probably the best of all the herbs that are out there for brain function. There's a reason that wise people in historical folklore were called sages, right? Sage really helps with mental function. It helps with blood flow to the brain, right? Which is probably part of the effect. But sage is really high in these compounds called terpenes that can help with the neurotransmitters like acetylcholine that help us make connections, right? So more sage has been shown to help with general memory function, but also creativity and problem solving and like navigating through stressful situations and things like that. So sage is one of those things where, like all spices, you're going to want to have a little bit of it sprinkled throughout your food. But there's also studies that show if you have an acute dosage of it, you can be more focused at that thing that you're trying to focus on, like a test or before public speaking or before a stressful presentation or something like that. But then if you supplement with it at those higher levels, it can actually improve your overall what we call executive function over time. So there's some really, really nice benefits there.
Learn something new on this show every day.
Every time.
Sage wisdom. Sage wisdom. That's great.
That was great. Okay, last one, rosemary.
So rosemary is a great antioxidant, and I know a lot of companies will use rosemary in their products just for that, for its antioxidant effects, and that's a great usage of it. But the main active ingredients, like these rosmarinic acids, are both antioxidants and anti-inflammatories, and I think that's a really cool thing, because sometimes we'll put some of these bioactives into one bucket or the other. They're either antioxidants or anti-inflammatories, but those two aspects of biochemistry are almost like two sides of the same coin. And so if you can get something like rosemary that does both of those, you get a little bit of both of those sides of the biochemistry pathway, which is just a nice overall effect for people to have.
Okay, so we're definitely doing an episode down the road on sage.
Yes.
I want to do that and talk about all the benefits of it. And I will say that sage and rosemary to me are pretty specific tasting spices, right?
They're pretty bold.
So we think of Thanksgiving, we think of poultry, potatoes and things like that. So maybe on the future episode when we talk about it, let's talk about how we can incorporate it more into our foods. How do you get a cute sage?
Yeah. Do you have like your coffee hack, cinnamon coffee? What do you do with sage?
There are supplements out there that are sage supplements, right? Okay. So just like you would take a supplement of anything.
Yeah.
You know, you can get sage capsules, and you can supplement at those higher levels. You know, 300 milligrams if you wanted to.
So Shawn, this has been an incredible conversation. Before we wrap it up, is there anything that you want to leave our audience with? Something maybe that's been on your mind that you want the spice industry to hear?
Yeah, I want people to eat more spices. like they are natural medicines, and people really need to get more of them in. And you know, one of the things that I do with my students, that I do with my clients, is I do something called the 30 plant challenge. Have you guys heard of that before?
No. What is that?
30 plant challenge?
No.
So 30 plant challenge is this idea of encouraging people to eat 30 different kinds of plants in a 7-day period. And the idea is that, you know, you eat more plants, you get more of these phytonutrients. Spices count in that count towards 30. You know, so you could say, like, you know, a lot of people would go 30 plants. I don't even think I know 30 plants. Never mind consume 30 plants, you know, and they're thinking, well, iceberg lettuce, cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers, I'm out. What else is there, right? The reason that we recommend it is that some really good research from this project called the Human Microbiome Project came out a few years ago, showing that, like, one of the things we want our microbiome to be is as diverse as possible. So meaning we have, you know, lots of different types of bacteria that are making lots of different types of signaling molecules that keep our body and our mind healthy. So how do we get a diverse microbiome? Well, we eat a diversity of plant foods. And so the data from the Human Microbiome Project showed that 30 is the sweet spot. So, you know, if you're eating 20, 30 is better. You have better microbiome diversity at 30, but not so much at 40, right? It sort of like plateaus out. So the target to have a good diverse microbiome is 30 plants in a 7-day period. But like I said, spices count. So, you know, we try to gamify it for people. We say, you know what, let's do this. Challenge somebody, challenge your family, challenge your buddies, challenge yourself, and you know, track it on an app or something like that. If you can get 30 plants and spices, you're going to have a more diverse microbiome, and your inflammation is going to be lower, and your brain is going to be stronger, and your mood is going to be better, and you're going to sleep better, and like all these health parameters fall into line if you have a good microbiome because you did the 30 plant challenge. And so with spices, it's great, because then people go, oh, great. So it counts if I add turmeric to my food. It counts if I add rosemary. It counts if I add cinnamon. And you know, it allows people to have this, you know, to have this little challenge, and the end result is, you know, you feel better and you perform better and you're healthier.
Well, I mean, shucks, just the Indian meal alone, you'll get like 12, 13 spices right
exactly.
Right? You'll be healthier the
Yeah.
more you eat Indian, which we're going to do in a little bit here.
Yeah.
Right?
So after every episode, we do a family meal. And so we bring all of our, you know, camera, audio, everybody comes on set.
Nice.
And so we thought, because of all the spices, we'll have Indian food. So we try to be on theme.
Very good theme.
I love it.
Shawn, how can our audience find you? What's your website? What are the best ways for us to follow you?
Yeah, best place to find me is just my website called doctalbot.com, and I've got all kinds of stuff there. I've got blogs and videos and free ebooks, and you know, a ton of stuff to educate people about all the kinds of things that we're talking about right now.
All right, well, that's a wrap on today's episode. Hopefully you're inspired to think a little bit more deeply about what's in your spice rack. If this conversation lit something up for you, you should check out Dr. Shawn Talbott's upcoming book, Wild Medicine, and forward this interview to your sourcing team, your R&D department, or your grower partners. This kind of holistic thinking improves our whole industry and even the world. All right, we'll see you next time on the OG Spice Guy Show.
The OG Spice Guy Show is produced and recorded by Galaxy Media in Los Angeles, California, in association with High Quality Organics, America's leading provider of organic spices. Executive producers are Jonathan Raju and Rob Clyde. Today's episode was produced by Rob Clyde and Max Flora. It was engineered and edited by Drew Unser. Graphics by Michelle Esteva. Web and SEO by Rebecca McDonald. And social media by Bethany Guerrero. You can DM and follow us on all platforms and socials at OG Spice Guy.